Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we are undertaking one of the most complex missions we've faced yet.
Yep.
We're dissecting Bill C-2.
Right. Officially the Strong Borders Act.
And you might think, okay, borders, customs, pretty straightforward. But no, this thing is huge.
It really is. It's a massive, sprawling piece of omnibus legislation. We're talking about overhauling Canada's approach to, well, everything. Transnational crime, fentanyl, illicit finance, immigration.
All jammed into one bill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this deep dive so critical for you to understand. The sheer audacity of it.
Yeah.
It tries to amend, 15 to 20 different laws across 3 big federal departments.
It's the definition of political hardball, isn't it?
Absolutely. Bundling critical security needs, things most people would agree on, with really controversial measures.
Things impacting civil liberties, privacy, especially this warrantless surveillance stuff we need to get into.
Yeah, big time.
And the context for all this new aggressive legislative power, is frankly disturbing. The very agencies tasked with implementing it.
The RCMP, the CBSA.
They're struggling. Just to keep current operations going, they're being handed this high-tech toolkit.
But they don't have enough hands to even hold it. It's a fundamental disconnect.
So let's unpack this. Let's start with that capacity crisis, the people on the ground who'd actually be enforcing this law.
Okay, so we have to start with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yeah.
Deputy Commissioner Duhaime, he was starkly honest, said the RCMP is at a crossroads.
Doesn't sound good.
No. And it's not just, a temporary hiring dip. It sounds structural.
How so?
High attrition rates, people leaving. And coupled with what he called anemic recruitment, just not enough new people coming in.
Which means
detachments across the country are severely overworked and understaffed. That's the reality.
And we need to pause here, I think, on the RCMP's structure. Because it's unique, right?
Yeah.
And that makes this staffing crunch even worse.
Absolutely critical point. They're not just the federal police handling national security, border crime, that sort of thing.
They're also the local cops for most of the country.
8 provinces, 3 territories, hundreds of towns and cities. They're the contract police force.
So when the federal force struggles...
the impact is immediate.
Yeah.
And local, often devastating for smaller communities.
Right. That dual mandate just amplifies the problem.
Hugely. And the numbers, they're pretty shocking. Over half the provinces and territories using the RCMP, they're reporting Mountie vacancy rates in the double digits.
Double digits. Wow, that's not just an inconvenience, is it?
No way. It means police coverage in huge parts of Canada, rural areas, remote communities, especially up north. It's spread dangerously thin.
It puts public safety at risk directly because often there's no one else.
Exactly. No alternative police provider. It's a colossal failure of, retention and recruitment.
And this crisis, it's forced the RCMP into a tough conversation, hasn't it? About who a Mountie should even be these days. Institutional reform.
Yeah, it's forcing a kind of cultural pivot. Assistant Commissioner Rhonda Blackmore, she talked openly about needing to reconsider the kinds of qualities it wants its officers to bring to the job. Well, for years, the model was about, ticking all the boxes. Physical fitness, tactical skills.
Conditional stuff.
Right. But the proposed shift is, it's pretty radical for a paramilitary organization like the RCMP.
They're looking for soft skills now.
That's what they're saying. People who can communicate with folks.
Yeah.
People who can de-escalate situations. Crucially. She even suggested they might have accidentally screened out individuals who maybe had the skills that we were looking for in today's policing world. Less confrontation, more community interaction.
It's a necessary change, you'd think.
Yeah.
Especially after things like the Mass Casualty Commission report highlighting communication failures.
Definitely needed. But here's the critical question, for me at least. Is it really realistic? Can a huge institution like the RCMP pivot to prioritizing these nuanced skills, communication, de-escalation, when they're under intense political pressure to just fill boots, to hit that 1,000 new officers target fast?
That's the tension, isn't it? Quantity versus quality. Always a fight and a big recruitment drive.
Always.
The government has tried to throw money at it, obviously, that throne speech commitment. Hire 1,000 additional RCMP officers.
Right.
And they massively boosted the Cadet allowance from $125 a week.
Which is basically nothing.
To $1,000 a week. That's serious money.
It's a clear signal, yeah. They know they need to compete in the job market.
But can they keep the quality up while rushing to hit that quota? Highly doubtful, I'd say. Hashtag TAG 1.2, the Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, capacity.
And this capacity problem, it's not just the RCMP. If this bill is about strong borders.
We have to talk about the CBSA, the Canada Border Services Agency.
Exactly. And they're facing an equally severe gap. The customs union estimates, get this, a current shortage of between 2,000 and 3,000 officers.
2,000 to 3,000. Just to handle what they're doing now.
Just to handle their existing duties before any new powers from this bill.
That's a staggering deficit right off the bat.
Yeah. Now, the government has promised investment, $617.7 million over 5 years.
Oh.
Specifically committed to train, hire, and deploy 1,000 CBSA offices personnel.
But wait, if they're short 2,000 to 3,000, and the promise is 1,000 over 5 years.
The math doesn't add up, does it?
Yeah.
It doesn't even close the existing gap.
Not even close.
And now, introduce Bill C-2 with its new expanded mandate for the CBSA.
And this is where the staffing crisis crashes right into the legislation itself.
Absolutely. Bill C-2 gives the CBSA significant new powers, like inspecting rail cars and marshaling yards, focusing on exports.
Which needs new training, new resources, a whole new focus, really, shifting from imports to exports.
All while the agency is already thousands of officers short for its current job.
It sounds like a recipe for, well, failure.
It creates a colossal challenge. That was the term one critic used. There's a known bottleneck.
Which is?
Training capacity. They can only train, estimate is, around 600 border officers per year, max.
So even if the money's there and the political will.
The actual institutional capacity to train 1,000 new officers quickly, while also integrating these huge new mandates and expanding their operational scope.
It's just not there.
It's simply not there. So if you give officers new powers, but you don't give them the people to actually use those powers, you don't strengthen the border.
You just stretch everyone even thinner.
Exactly. You guarantee that existing critical functions like inspecting incoming containers will probably suffer.
So the central thread is clear right from the start. The government's pushing new, aggressive, tech-heavy solutions.
Right.
But the human infrastructure needed to make any of it work is, crumbling.
That's the question, isn't it? Can technology really fix a problem that's fundamentally about not having enough trained people?
Let's hold that thought. Let's move on to the actual tools Bill C-2 proposes, the security mandate. Okay, so the main goal of the Strong Borders Act, stated goal anyway, is clear. Enhance national security, fight transnational organized crime, disrupt illicit money flows.
Yeah, heavy focus on stopping guns, drugs, and stolen vehicles at the border. Things Canadians are definitely worried about. Hashtag Take 2.1 addressing transnational organized crime and border flow. And the reason for this border focus, it's undeniable when you see the vulnerability. That statistic is just shocking.
The container inspection one?
Yeah. Only 1% of shipping containers coming into Canada actually get inspected.
1%. Think about that.
It means 99% of containers are just. A wide-open opportunity for criminals to push drugs and guns through our biggest ports, Vancouver, Montreal especially.
It's staggering, and the bill targets two really high-profile problems, doesn't it? Stolen cars and illegal guns.
Right. The flood of stolen vehicles, mostly going out through Montreal, and the constant flow of illegal firearms coming in.
And the proposed solution? Money. A promised investment of $300 million.
For border investigations and scanners. High-tech stuff.
Okay, $300 million sounds like a lot, but...
This is where we circle back to capacity and procurement reality. Critics jumped on this immediately. The government offered no timeline.
No timeline for when the scanners, the investigators, when any of it will actually arrive at the border.
Exactly. When will the tools get into the hands of the officers who need them? Crickets.
And let's be honest, skepticism is warranted here, isn't it? Looking at recent federal procurement projects.
Oh, yeah. The track record isn't great. Massive failures. Remember the ventilators bought during COVID? Sold for scrap.
Or the Arrive scam app fiasco.
Yeah.
Millions spent, dubious contracts, minimal oversight.
Precisely. So the fear is this $300 million for border tech gets bogged down. Procurement delays, political scandals. Meanwhile, border officers wait years for the tools they needed yesterday.
And that money has to cover a lot, right? Not just the scanners themselves.
No, you need the buildings to house them, the staff to run them, the analysts to interpret the data. If you're only inspecting 1% now, scaling that up dramatically needs a fundamental overhaul immediately, not just a promise of cash down the road.
Now, the second piece here is interesting, the focus on exports. giving CBSA new powers to inspect rail cars leaving the country.
Right, in marshalling yards.
Well, exports.
This is aimed squarely at the auto theft crisis. Those stolen cars, they're often loaded onto containers way before they get to the port, then shipped out, mainly to the Middle East and Africa.
So inspecting rail cars inland?
Let's CBSA try to intercept the stolen goods before they even get loaded onto the ships. It makes finding them much easier, theoretically. More efficient interdiction. Hashtag tag 2.2, tackling the fentanyl crisis.
Okay, moving on. One of the absolute deadliest drivers behind this legislation, the fentanyl crisis.
It's just a horrific humanitarian tragedy. The numbers are terrifying. Over 49,000 Canadians dead from opioid overdoses in the last 9 years.
And it keeps climbing.
Keeps climbing.
Yeah.
And we know it's linked to our borders. The main source of fentanyl, its precursor chemicals, often traced back to suppliers in China, Mexico.
So Bill C-2 tries to tackle this not just by catching drugs at the border, but through legal tools, too.
Yeah, through chemical control mechanisms.
Yeah.
Trying to be faster, more nimble.
Explain that. Because the traditional way of banning a new drug or chemical, it's incredibly slow, right?
Painfully slow.
Yeah.
Parliament has to pass legislation. By the time they do, criminals have already moved on to a slightly different chemical that isn't technically illegal yet.
So the bill proposes a workaround, a bureaucratic shortcut.
That's basically it. Chemical control measures. It gives the Minister of Health the power to rapidly classify illicit substances and precursor chemicals by administrative order. Meaning the minister can quickly add or delete substances from Schedule V of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act without waiting for that whole slow legislative process.
So trying to move at the speed of the criminals online who are constantly tweaking formulas?
Exactly. It's meant to be proactive. A new analog pops up in a lab overseas. Canada can legally ban it, potentially within days, not months or years.
But that gives a lot of power to one administrative official, doesn't it, bypassing Parliament?
It does. It's a trade-off. Speed versus parliamentary oversight.
Saving lives versus democratic process, essentially.
That's the argument, yeah. In a crisis like fentanyl, the government says speed has to win. Hashtag tag 2.3, modernizing maritime and sex offender oversight.
Okay, Bill C-2 also hits two other areas needing modernization: maritime security and sex offender oversight. Let's start with the Canadian Coast Guard, the CCG.
Right, so the CCG, mostly seen as civilian, right? Search and rescue, icebreaking.
Yeah.
This bill amends the Oceans Act to formally add security-related activities to their mandate.
Like what?
Countering criminal activity, drug trafficking, empowers the CCG to do security patrols, share intel formally with defense, with CSIS, etc.
Why now? What's the significance?
Well, it formalizes something they were kind of already doing informally. Strengthens capacity in our maritime zones, which are definitely used for smuggling.
Makes sense.
But there's an interesting political angle here, too.
Oh.
This civilian agency's budget, now formally linked to security. There's this ongoing fight about whether spending like this counts towards Canada's NATO 2% defense spending target.
So if the CCG is now officially doing security,
the government can potentially count that spending towards the NATO goal, which is, a major point of international pressure on Canada right now.
Very clever accounting, potentially. Okay, now, the Sex Offender Information Registration Act, SOIRA. What's changing there?
This is about enhancing information sharing, domestically and internationally, with police security partners.
And the key operational change?
Authorizing CBSA officers at the border to actually consult the SOIRA database as part of their legal duties.
Okay, that sounds completely logical. Why wasn't that happening already?
That's the shocking part. The reason this is needed. An MP revealed this statistic. Canada has nearly 60,000 registered sex offenders.
Right.
Over a 7-year period, how many passports did the government cancel for these offenders? 13.
13 out of almost 60,000.
13. And zero in the last 3 years of that period.
That's unbelievable. What does that even mean operationally?
It means thousands of convicted child abusers were legally free to travel abroad with valid Canadian passports, potentially reoffending internationally.
It's an astonishing failure of communication between departments, presumably.
Total system breakdown. So letting CBSA check the SOIRA list at the border, it's meant to close that huge loophole, flag convicted individuals trying to leave, allow action, maybe finally cancel some passports.
Okay, so Part 2 highlights some arguably necessary security updates. But now we have to talk about the price, the potential cost of fundamental privacy rights.
Yeah. This is where we get into the really contested stuff, the poison pills, as critics call them. Right? This section is why you see such unified opposition. NDP, Conservatives, Greens. They all hate these parts of C2. They see them as inviting constitutional challenges, massively expanding state surveillance.
Okay, let's drill down. The information demand power. Amending the criminal code. This is the heart of the privacy fight, right? What level of suspicion does an officer need to demand info without a judge?
Okay, so under this new power, a peace officer or a public officer, broader term, can make an information demand.
To who?
Electronic service providers. Think Bell, TELUS, Rogers, Google, your ISP, your email provider.
And the standard.
Only reasonable grounds to suspect an offense has occurred.
Okay, reasonable grounds to suspect. That phrase is key. Why is that so problematic, constitutionally speaking? What's the difference between that and the usual standard reasonable grounds to believe?
It's a huge difference, a massive gulf legally. Reasonable grounds to believe, that's the standard for getting a warrant.
Right.
It requires concrete, objective evidence, something solid that makes a judge confident a crime has happened or is happening.
Okay.
Reasonable grounds to suspect. It's much, much lower. More like a hunch, an intuition, based on some observable facts, but not necessarily pointing to a specific crime yet.
Give us an analogy, maybe.
Okay. Imagine you see someone hanging around a car, looking nervous, glancing around. You might have reasonable grounds to suspect they're up to no good, maybe thinking about breaking in.
Right.
But you'd need more. Seeing them actually jiggle the handle, pull out a tool to have reasonable grounds to believe a crime, like attempted theft, is actually underway.
So this lower standard means officers need very little evidence to compel what kind of information?
The government says it's just very basic information.
Yeah.
Name, address, phone number, maybe IP address. Stuff to identify a subscriber quickly.
And their argument is, this is just for the early stages, before they need a full warrant for actual content.
That's their justification. They say they need to move fast, like online criminals do. Get an ID quickly, then build the case for a real warrant later.
But the pushback is fierce.
Oh, yeah. Civil liberties groups, the CCLA, they point right at the Supreme Court's ruling in Bykavets. Just came out in 2024.
What did that say?
It affirmed a reasonable expectation of privacy in foundational internet records, like IP addresses linked to subscriber info.
So even if the info is basic,
Getting it without a warrant, based on that lower suspect standard, they argue it violates Section 8 of the Charter, your right against unreasonable search and seizure.
they see it as warrantless access, a sweeping surveillance power.
Letting the government map out who's talking to who online without any real judicial check at the start. That's the fear.
And this demand power isn't just a request, is it? It's backed by force, the new SAIA.
Right. The Security of Advanced Access to Information Act. It's not just that police can ask. The tech companies must be set up to hand over the data fast.
How does that work?
It compels these core providers, the big ISPs, telcos, to be technically capable of facilitating this access. They have to build the systems to comply quickly.
That sounds like a big burden on the tech sector.
It is a significant compliance cost and a technological one. Build the capacity to instantly find and fork over subscriber info on demand. No more slow, manual searches.
Is there any protection for things like encryption?
There is one crucial caveat, yeah. It speaks to that tension between security and cybersecurity.
Okay.
Providers are exempt if complying would introduce a systemic vulnerability, like if they were forced to break their own encryption to comply.
So they don't have to create backdoors.
Right. The idea is to prevent law enforcement demands from making everyone's data less secure overall by weakening core protections. But even with that exemption.
The basic requirement remains. Be ready to open the door quickly when asked.
Exactly. Prepare your systems for rapid handover based on reasonable suspicion. Hashtag tag 3.2, the mail inspection controversy.
Okay, let's pivot from digital privacy to physical privacy. The mail.
Ah, yes. Section 41 of the Canada Post Corporation Act. This one caused a stir.
The bill proposes allowing Canada Post to open mail if they have, again, reasonable grounds to suspect it contains contraband, like fentanyl.
Right. And this touches on something really historically protected, doesn't it? The privacy of your letters, your packages.
Definitely. But the interpretation of this power, it seems completely confused or deliberately ambiguous.
Total conflict. The Liberal government insists this power is only meant for actual law enforcement, RCMP, CBSA acting with a judicial warrant.
So bringing Canada Post procedures in line with private couriers like FedEx or Purolator, who already allow warranted searches.
That's the government line, just leveling the playing field.
But the opposition says that's not what the bill actually says.
Exactly. They point out the literal text of the amendment doesn't mention warrants.
Yeah.
It doesn't explicitly say peace officer or judicial authorization.
Which leaves the door open to interpretation.
Wide open. Critics argue, if the government meant warrants, why didn't they just write "with a warrant" into the law? It's just a few words.
So the fear is
that the vague wording could allow ordinary Canada Post employees to open mail based on some undefined suspicion, rifling through letters and packages on a whim, as opponents put it.
so infringing on confidentiality without law enforcement involvement or judicial oversight.
Whether intended or not, the ambiguity creates that possibility. It looks like either really bad drafting or maybe a deliberate attempt to legislate around the charter using vagueness, hoping the courts sort it out later.
Either way, it creates a chilling effect, doesn't it? On using the mail for confidential things, hashtag tag 3.3, the war on cash.
And finally, under the banner of fighting illicit finance, Bill C-2 takes aim at cash.
Which critics immediately dubbed the war on cash.
Pretty much. This involves amending the PCMLTFA, the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act.
What's the specific restriction?
It proposes a ban. No person or entity can accept cash payments, donations, or deposits of $10,000 or more.
$10,000 cash limit per transaction or related transactions.
Right. The intent seems clear enough. Combat money laundering.
Because criminals use big piles of cash to move dirty money around outside the traceable digital system.
Exactly. Cash transactions at $10, you force more activity into banks, into digital payments, where it can be tracked and potentially flagged.
Makes sense from a law enforcement perspective, but who does this actually hit in the real world, besides the criminals?
Well, that's the critique. It disproportionately impacts perfectly legitimate sectors and people.
Like who?
Think about, say, an independent contractor. Does a big home renovation, gets paid $15,000 cash when the job's done. That's banned.
Or farmers, selling equipment, livestock.
Yeah, small-town farmers. Large cash deals are common. Or seniors who often prefer cash for big purchases, maybe distrust digital banking.
People in rural areas, maybe with limited bank access.
Exactly. For them, cash is simple, immediate, reliable. Forcing them into traceable digital systems feels like government overreach, an attack on their way of doing business or just living.
So the argument is the government's targeting the tool used by criminals, large cash sums, but they're hurting ordinary, law-abiding Canadians who rely on that same tool for legitimate reasons.
Right, undermining financial autonomy for the sake of surveillance, essentially.
And they're serious about enforcement too, right? Penalties are going up?
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Maximum administrative penalties for noncompliance increasing by up to 40 times. It shows they mean business on tracking funds. But yeah, that cash ban is the flashpoint because it hits so many everyday transactions.
Okay, Bill C-2 really is an omnibus bill because we're not done yet. Beyond security, privacy, cash, whole sections, parts 6 through 9, are dedicated to overhauling Canada's immigration and asylum system.
Yeah, another area under huge political and operational pressure right now. Hashtag tag 4.1, expanded ministerial discretion. And this section, part 8 specifically, introduces what might be the most drastic political change in the whole bill. It gives unprecedented, really undefined power to the executive branch.
To the Minister of Immigration specifically, and Cabinet?
Yes. Sweeping new authority.
What can the minister do with this new power?
Cancel, suspend, or refuse immigration documents or applications, block entire categories of new applications, en masse.
Based on what criteria?
Simply based on reasons determined to be in the public interest.
Okay, in the public interest, that sounds vague and potentially subjective.
Extremely vague.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly the problem. Civil society groups are sounding the alarm. The terms public interest, emergency, they're left totally undefined in the bill.
Which means
it opens the door to arbitrary decisions, denial, delay, even deportation, without clear rules or guaranteed due process. Especially worrying for asylum seekers whose lives depend on predictable standards.
But the really alarming part, the bit that jumps out, is the retroactive effect clause.
Yes, that's the kicker. That transforms a vague power into a potentially dangerous, destabilizing one.
Retroactive effect, meaning decisions can apply backwards in time.
Exactly. The minister could issue an order that retroactively cancels documents or decisions that were perfectly valid at the time they were issued.
Give us an example. How could that play out?
Okay, imagine a student. They came here last year, got a valid study permit, followed all the rules in place then,
right,
under this new power. If the minister suddenly decides, maybe due to a housing crisis or just a political shift, that, say, students in that specific program are no longer in the public interest.
their valid permit could be canceled retroactively.
Potentially, yes. Even though they did everything right according to the law at the time.
Wow. That creates massive uncertainty, doesn't it?
Profound legal uncertainty. For hundreds of thousands of temporary residents, immigrants. Critics say it makes the whole system vulnerable to political whims, threatens the rule of law itself. You can't rely on legally obtained documents anymore. Hashtag tag tag 4.2 new rules for refugee claims.
Okay, moving to asylum rules. The government says the goal here is efficiency, making the process faster, sending a message that asylum isn't a shortcut to immigrate.
Right. Managing the high volume of claims.
So what specific changes are meant to achieve that?
They're introducing new grounds for making a claim ineligible right at the start, trying to weed out claims they see as opportunistic, I suppose.
Such as?
Well, one is timing. A claim might be ineligible if it's made more than 1 year after the person first arrived in Canada, if they arrived after June 2020.
Okay. And the other one? Seems aimed at irregular crossings.
Yes. A claim could be ineligible if it's made 14 days or more after someone crossed irregularly between official border points, like at Roxham Road historically.
So trying to force people into the official system faster, discourage waiting.
That's the goal. Manage the flow, speed up initial decisions. But this ties directly into that huge political fight over distribution, especially with Quebec.
Right. The Bloc Québécois, the Quebec government, they've been very loud about bearing an unfair burden.
And they have the numbers. Quebec's currently receiving almost nearly 50% of all asylum seekers arriving in Canada.
50% for one province.
Yeah, it puts incredible strain on their housing, social services, schools, everything.
So they're demanding
a better distribution system, mandatory sharing of asylum seekers across other provinces. They argue their capacity is maxed out, they can't carry the load alone, while other provinces take relatively few.
It really shows how a national issue like border security has intensely local and unequally felt consequences.
Absolutely. That tension is a major backdrop to this whole bill.
And finally, under immigration, there's data sharing again, connecting back to system integrity.
Yes. Provisions allowing IRCC immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada to disclose personal immigration info to federal partners.
Law enforcement, national security agents.
Right. Framed as necessary for cooperation, detecting fraud, preventing people from using multiple identities, upholding the system's integrity.
Are there safeguards?
The government says yes. Strong safeguards. Prohibitions against further sharing, especially with foreign countries, without IRCC's consent. But, once you start centralizing and sharing sensitive personal data more widely,
the risk of misuse or just scope creep always goes up.
It's always a concern. So given everything we've just discussed, warrantless demands, mail searches, cash bans, retroactive powers, it's no surprise the political process around Bill C-2 has been just as contentious as the substance. Hashtag 5.1 omnibus controversy.
Let's talk about the bill itself physically. Up to 172 pages. Amending 15, maybe 20 different laws across multiple departments.
It's a monster. And there's basically cross-party agreement, NDP, Greens, Conservatives, that this is an improper use of an omnibus bill.
What's the problem with omnibus bills? Why do opposition parties hate them?
They argue the format is designed for one thing: to ram complex, often unrelated, measures through Parliament without proper scrutiny.
How does it do that?
By bundling things together. You take highly controversial bits like the warrantless info demands or the cash ban, and you package them with necessary, maybe popular things like updating the Coast Guard mandate or cracking down on fentanyl precursors.
So the opposition is forced into a tough spot.
Exactly. Yeah. Vote against the whole thing, and you look like you're against border security or fighting fentanyl. Vote for it, and you're forced to approve massive privacy infringements or things you fundamentally oppose.
It limits debate, limits committee study on individual pieces.
Right. It's a way to bypass detailed scrutiny on the controversial parts. A political tactic.
And the timing? Why the rush? There's speculation this was pushed through quickly for external reasons.
Yeah, the prevailing theory links the urgency of the Strong Borders Act to, well, pressure from the United States.
Appeasing Washington.
That's the suggestion. Concerns about border security, trade tensions, maybe past U.S. criticism about fentanyl flowing across the border, or even linked to trade tariff disputes. The idea is Canada needed to show the U.S. it was taking tangible action to lock down its borders against crime and contraband. But while the bill throws the kitchen sink at surveillance and border powers, critics point out something huge is missing. Something Canadians are very concerned about right now.
Bail reform.
Exactly. This has become a major, consistent line of attack from the Conservatives.
Because the government's own throne speech talked about getting tougher, right, on repeat violent offenders.
It did, specifically mention car theft, home invasions, drug smuggling, getting tougher on bail for those folks.
And yet, none of that is in Bill C-2.
Nope, completely absent.
Which fuels the soft on crime accusation.
Absolutely. The opposition leverages this heavily. They say the government is focused on digital surveillance, expanding administrative power, while ignoring the alleged failure of catch-and-release bail policies they claim let violent repeat offenders back onto the streets almost immediately.
So the government wants new tools to catch criminals faster.
While the opposition says the real priority should be making sure criminals, once caught, actually stay off the streets, strengthening sentencing, maybe mandatory minimums for fentanyl traffickers, gun criminals, tightening bail.
It sets up a real dichotomy in public safety policy, doesn't it? Tech control versus judicial consequences.
Yeah. The opposition argues that tougher bail, tougher sentencing is the real strong border needed at the community level, and it's completely missing from this Strong Borders Act. #tagoutro.
So this deep dive into Bill C-2, it really lays bare this fundamental tension, doesn't it? Right at the heart of modern government, that collision between national security demands and fundamental personal privacy rights.
It's stark. On one side, you have law enforcement, RCMP, CBSA, and groups like the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. They're arguing these new measures are vital, necessary tools to fight sophisticated crime, digital child exploitation, that catastrophic fentanyl crisis.
They need these tools, they say.
Right. But on the other side, you have civil liberties groups, privacy experts, and unified political opposition issuing immediate warnings, government overreach.
Pointing to things like that lower reasonable suspicion standard for info demands.
The maybe warrantless mail search, those incredibly vague and retroactive ministerial powers in immigration.
Yeah.
The ban on large cash deals.
They see it all undermining the charter, inviting immediate court challenges.
Yeah. It really forces us back to that unavoidable question we started with.
If the agencies, the RCMP, the CBSA, are fundamentally short-staffed, facing recruitment crises, bleeding experienced officers, struggling just to train new ones,
can these powerful, intrusive new digital tools actually solve a public safety problem that seems rooted in just not having enough people, in institutional capacity failures?
Or do these measures just shift the burden onto the privacy rights of ordinary citizens, onto their financial autonomy, creating a kind of technological illusion of security,
while failing to actually staff the police detachments, the border crossings, the analysis centers, where the real work has to get done?
It feels like a strong border needs both, doesn't it? Smart laws that respect rights and the people on the ground to enforce them effectively.
You'd think so. You need both. The human resources have to be there.
We'll definitely be watching the inevitable legal challenges to this bill and whether those promised resources, the scanners, the officers, ever actually materialize.
Absolutely. A story far from over.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Strong Borders Act.